Joy Boy, Davy Jones, Nika. When Oda was cooking up the world of One Piece, he built pretty much everything on the backs of these ancient legendary characters. And after going back through the entire history of One Piece, I think I finally might have understood why Oda made these legendary characters to begin with and what's so important about each single one of them. Because as you might have noticed, I just can't get enough of the ancient world of One Piece, like first world, second world. Dude, give me all the worlds, because things seem kind of way more interesting there and insane than even the chaos of the current storyline with Luffy, and the reason for all of that chaos to begin with is, of course, our first character, the Abyssal King, Imu. As you should well know at this point, the secret ruler of the One Piece world sits on the empty throne. They command the 5 elders and the Holy Knights, manipulate the entire world government, and quite literally can cross entire nations off the map. Iwa-chan let us know that there used to be a person called Imu with the name Nerona, which ties him to one of the 20 original royal families from the Void Century, so we're talking about someone who's probably been around since before the ancient kingdom fell, and if the mural's as old as we all think it is, maybe even longer. Way longer. Now, why does Ivankov out of all people know about this? I'm kind of curious and mind blown, but that's not the topic here. What's much more important is that Imu had millennia of scheming, hiding, and pressing that great cleansing button over and over again, pretty much whenever things get a little bit too close to the truth. Now, what we of course don't know yet is where Imu's demonic powers actually come from. Recently in the story, it's been very heavily hinted that Imu's immortal age could be the result potentially of the Ope Ope no Mi's immortality surgery, but what about all their other crazy dark powers like Domi Reversi, possession and mind control, and as we see in the case of Harold, even completely taking over the mind of a person, conjuring up a big gun from a book? Like, is the Abyss its own power system? Is it some ancient incomprehensible technology or a devil fruit? I mean, this is straight up godhood, or I guess in this case, devilhood. I still can't decide if I think that Imu's the Earth God or the Sea Devil or something else like a human, which would kind of mean that Oda is for sure gonna intentionally make me look dumb by making them something else like the Forest God or whatever. And whatever the answer may be, they have managed to live way past the normal human timeline, that we know at the very least. But of course, I think there is some reasonable debate to be had about whether Imu is from Joy Boy's era or even older than that, dating back to the First World. Like, is Imu the crown figure right here in the mural? Yes, it's 2026. We're still talking about the mural. Of course, it's gonna haunt me for the rest of One Piece. Or are they the giant shadow beast over here on the left? Or the dragon thing in the middle? Or all three? I don't know. But let's just imagine for a moment here that Imu was actually born in the Great Kingdom, or at the very least around the same time as Joy Boy, roughly 900 years ago. They're one of the 20 kings and have a total super crazy crush on Lili maybe as well. A real throuple situation. That's kind of weird. I've theorized now for ages, as you know, that Imu was a one-time ally maybe, or possibly even a former crewmate or brother or friend of Joy Boy's, but then eventually betrayed him, or they kind of had opposite views to form the world government instead. I mean, it's pretty clear that these two definitely knew each other very closely based on the fact that Imu is sweating bullets every single time he feels just an inch of Joy Boy's haki, which is a very understandable reaction to feeling Joy Boy's inches, if you get my drift. Now, there's definitely some serious unresolved issues here, no question about it. The kind of issues where they'll, just keep their dead bestie and or ex's hat in a giant freezer for 800 years. And bro, Imu will literally do anything before going to therapy, I guess. Now, of course, just to be clear here, I think there could be many other, very legitimate reasons why Imu is keeping a giant straw hat in a freezer. First of all, it's the first item that's associated with Imu personally. They get introduced by going down into that freezer and looking at it. So it must be something important. Yes, it could be a, kind of memento thing, remembering whatever their relationship with Joy Boy was, and it's just like, for the good old times, right? Or, as I like to think, it's probably holding some other crazy secret too. Now, you might have watched this video right here where I talk about the Straw Hat specifically. It's a big theory about why I think that Oda chose the Straw Hat very, intentionally with specific reasons in mind. There's a lot of word plays and like crazy like Shinto and Japanese connotations to straw and how it kind of binds and is able to seal away and denominate where gods are supposed to dwell, which obviously is very relevant with, you know, the Nika stuff and Joy Boy having had, you know, the Nika fruit and everything. Anyways, long story short for this video, if you want to watch that one, I recommend it. We're gonna have the link in the description below. But basically, the idea here is that the Straw Hat might actually hold something of power or value that Emu wants to preserve by putting it on ice, or wants to contain by putting it on ice instead, freezing the head so that whatever is inside it can't be used. Now, what could that be? Well, again, as I said, I really like the idea that just how it is in Japanese mythology, you know, some type of actual god might be hidden or sealed away within the Straw Hat. That could be Nika, it could be Joy Boy, and it might just be Emu kind of keeping them there, or it could be something like the Eternal Flame or some other power, like we already saw how, you know, Joy Boy wove his haki into a knot, into fabric, to store within Emeth, the giant robot. We'll talk about Emeth too, of course. So it could be that the Straw Hat itself is woven out of haki or some other crazy power. And obviously you need to ask the question, does that mean that Luffy's Straw Hat is special? I personally think it's much more likely that Luffy's Straw Hat that he got from Shanks, who got it from Roger, actually, you know, is more of a replica that kind of is symbolizing the power of the original Straw Hat that Emu has now his hands on. But anyways, that's a very long detour, just so you know why I think that's actually relevant. Again, just watch that video later if you're really interested. Now, considering that Emu's whole devil thing is kind of their main deal, it really seems like they might have found some ancient power that completely changed them if they ever even were human to begin with. And I mean, who wouldn't backstab everyone and anyone that they loved for a taste of those sweet, sweet demon powers? Mwah. Tasty. Now, they can straight up possess their subordinates, turn other people into demon slaves against their will with the Domi Reversi ability, and then even suck the life out of their closest followers with the you know, highest ranks of the Abyss Seal, like we saw with Saint Saturn at the end of Ekid Island. Rip to the least real one in One Piece, I guess. No one cares that you're dead, Saturn. I'm very sorry. Now, even with living for centuries and all those demonic powers that they have, Emu's story, I think, has the potential to actually surprisingly involve some real tragedy. Like before they were corrupted by the Abyss or something, they might have actually been pretty chill and cool. Oda will probably do this very classic backstory thing he does and make me cry about this monster in the end, kind of like he did with Blackbeard, who suddenly got this very sad backstory during, you know, God Valley, and it's probably gonna get even sadder, and we're all gonna kind of feel bad for him. I already feel a little bit bad for him, and that's kind of messed up, because I don't want to feel bad for Blackbeard, but here we are, and I'm pretty sure we're gonna get the same for Emu, especially after Vegapunk gave us the whole, oh, both sides during the Ancient War, like, had their points, and I don't know who morally was actually superior, it's really hard to tell. That to me means that either Joy Boy did some really messed up stuff and wasn't that great of a dude, which is possible, or if Joy Boy was a nice dude, as we kind of think he was with Luffy and everything and the parallels we see there, that would mean that Emu also had some valid points and a valid perspective on things. Either way, not that black and white, is it now? So as I said, you know, Oda will do his thing, and I'll probably cry about this crazy monster in the end, even though these days, Demon Emu is like a real creep who casually says stuff like, "I desire Vivi." Which, you know, weird dude, 800 to 18. It's a little bit of a problematic age gap, dude. Not to mention, you've literally killed her dad, so that would make, you know, dinner a little bit awkward. As we saw with Cobra, Emu is very much willing to kill anyone and everyone who learns anything about their true identity, which is ironic as a lot of people know about it, but they really seem to want to hide the entire truth of the Void Century, including, but not limited to, of course, their very own existence. They killed the King of Alabasta, then tried to kill Sabo by nuking an island, tried to kill Wapol after both of them saw what happened to Vivi's father, which, again, it's kind of crazy because, like, technically a bunch of people should just know about Emu, Shanks, Dofi, Blackbeard, all the former Yonko who literally attacked them at the same time on God Valley, who apparently then just thought that they were attacking normal Saturn, who was growing this weird shadow demon thing from him, I guess? But as the story has launched into the final saga now, everything's truly focused on Emu as the big bad right now, at least. It's pretty much everybody against Zawardo. But let's now shift things over to my second character on this list, to Imu's best frenemy, lover, I don't know, Joy Boy, the man who awakened the Nika fruit before Luffy did. Pretty hipster. The world's first pirate, even more hipster, and the real hockey man whose 800-year-old knots make even Shanks' Wi-Fi hockey look like kid stuff. That's ultra hipster. Alright, I'm sorry, I feel like that wasn't funny the first time. I doubled down on it, did it 2 more times. Apologies. Also, I gotta say, it's maybe not entirely fair to Shanks because the giants, at least on Egghead, act kind of like Shanks is pretty, up there even after the hockey knot crushed the Gorosei off the island. But Joy Boy here was born roughly 900 years ago, we can assume, right at the dawn of the Void Century in the Great Kingdom. Probably. But he wasn't just a king or a hero though. Vegapunk specifically let us know that he was then called the first pirate, which should kind of count for something in a story that's all about pirates and piracy and the main character who wants to become king of the pirates by finding the One Piece, which turns out is actually Joy Boy's treasure. In other words, Joy Boy had that spirit of adventure, that very same one that Luffy's of course inherited today, and low-key, I'm kind of like certain that being Sake is actually the story of Joy Boy's life that Oda has hidden within song form. Again, if you're interested, I made a whole video about that and you can check that out, link in the description below. But together with his allies, Joy Boy fought against this alliance of the 20 kings and tragically lost against Imo and the others, who then built the world government and the One Piece world that we know today. Now, we of course don't know exactly why they were fighting or how they were even fighting. It could have been over control of the ancient weapons, since we know that the ancient weapons are responsible for the flooding of the world. It's very possible that Joy Boy was using them during the war himself and caused some of the flooding, because Vegapunk very specifically called him out for letting them survive into the present day, and it kind of makes sense because they're all hidden in countries affiliated with Joy Boy to begin with. Fishman Island, Wano, and that would also kind of explain why Vegapunk was like, I think both sides were not that great, because if Joy Boy flooded the world with these weapons, fighting Imo or whatever, that would not be the greatest thing to do either. But maybe another reason for the war might have been over energy and resources. Specifically, I'm thinking about the Forbidden Sun, that eternal flame that could provide unlimited power to the Great Kingdom and its ancient weapons. That does kind of remind me a lot of nuclear energy, by the way. Like, look at that reactor that Vegapunk built for the fake one. And we know that Oda is really big on Japanese history and like Japan's connection to nuke. And I think something like nuclear power exists in One Piece, but we'll have to wait and see. But back to my point here, I think it's truly wild every time I think about it that Joy Boy actually somehow managed to lose this war, because his side included, and hold your devil fruits here, Joy Boy's god tier haki, the Nika powers, plus the combined powers of giants, fishmen, minks, samurai, and so on and so forth, plus at least one ancient weapon, probably 2, maybe 3, like, what is Imu still hiding up that demon sleeve of theirs to deal with all of that and, like win a war in the face of all these crazy powers? Whatever the true reason and outcome might have been though, Joy Boy did make a lot of promises, most famously to Poseidon and the people of Fishman Island, but wasn't able to keep many of those. But we do know that instead Joy Boy left behind his legacy and will in the form of the poneglyphs, which Nefertari D, Lili, Vivi's ancestor, we'll get to her, allowed to spread across the world, probably spread it herself, right? These unbreakable, undestroyable stones were scattered to his allies to preserve the true history, the location of the One Piece, and a bunch of other stuff. Which then, of course, has, in the more recent One Piece time, led to people like Roger or Luffy hunting these stones down to find the One Piece, because inherited will, baby, and the flowing of the ages, right? Roger's entire speech in a nutshell. Now, this next legend, though, might have been Joy Boy's right-hand man for all we know, or just a foot soldier. Either way, we're now gonna talk about the Iron Giant Emeth. Because let's be real, he's got a prime spot next to what we think is Joy Boy on the mural here, and his very short flashback that we got gave us the actual first official appearance of Joy Boy in the story, in a classic silhouette fashion of course, but also the first time the Void Century has actually in canon appeared on screen in the manga / anime, right? Which is kind of crazy. We also got to hear Joy Boy's voice for the first time, which sounds a lot like a young shonen guy, very much like Luffy. I cannot show you that, of course, on this channel for hopefully obvious reasons, copyright and stuff. You've probably already seen it, but in case you haven't, he basically sounds like a young guy Luffy's age. What we do know though is that Joy Boy literally entrusted Emeth to carry his own haki in a materialized form into the future to then release at the right point. But there's just so many other questions I've got about Emeth as a concept. Like, was he always a giant robot? Did the people in the past, in the ancient kingdom or in the first world, know how to create sentient beings, sentient robots basically? That's kind of wild. Or was he maybe a human, like a crewmate of Joy Boys that got then soul swapped into that iron body with a devil fruit? What we actually do know is that Emeth was created about 900 years ago, right smack in the middle of the Great Kingdom's technological peak, and as far as we can tell at least, Emeth seems to be only awakened by the Drums of Liberation, which is Luffy's heartbeat when he goes Gear 5 into his Nika form. So I think we can pretty safely assume that the same might have been true for Joy Boy as well, since he had Luffy's devil fruit. Which actually brings up a pretty big dilemma here, because we do also know that Emeth once woke up from his centuries-long slumber about 200 years ago in the story and climbed up the red line to attack Maurizua. That's then where he got destroyed, and then Saturn decided instead of getting rid of it, which were his actual orders, he actually gave it to Vegapunk later on to research it and reverse engineer some of it, which then probably led to the creation of, you know, the Kuma pacifista that we have now. But my real question here is, how did Emeth power up 200 years ago? Because as far as we know, there shouldn't have been a Nika figure around that time. In fact, there pretty much definitely wasn't one, since the Gorosei at least said that the fruit has not been awakened in 800 years. So did Emeth have some other secret power source? Was there another way he can turn himself on and off? Or maybe was there someone who actually did awaken the Nika fruit and we and the government just didn't know about it? It's a pretty big mystery, honestly, but Emeth's very existence could also represent a huge difference for the final big war because, hey, listen, okay, the world government has been really stacking up their army. They've got the Marines, the Holy Knights, the Pacifista, they're trying to get the Elbaf Giants on their side, they probably have a whole demon army waiting to serve Emu, so it pretty sure would be nice for Luffy to find a, like, treasure trove of giant robots to even out the playing field a little bit. At least we got that giant robot-shaped lab on Elbaf, which seems to be even older than the Void Century, like 3,000 years old. It's a lot bigger than Emeth, so maybe, like, that lab can make more robots. Or maybe, even though we did see Emeth go down in the flames of Egghead, I mean, I still wouldn't completely rule out the idea that he might still have survived and still be out there. This is One Piece we're talking about, right? So I wouldn't be too surprised if this Iron Giant still has a big role to play in the story, but even if not, we'll for sure see him again in the inevitable Void Century flashback that we're surely gonna get, Oda, right? That's the thing I'm like most looking forward to in the story. Please, please, please. I want to see Emeth there, along with, of course, also Zunesha, this massive elephant with the entire country of Zou on his back. It's just casually hiding one of the 4 road poneglyphs that lead to the One Piece, and this boy here is really ancient. We're talking at least over 1,000 years old, maybe even older, because this in the first world of One Piece looks a lot like Zunesha too, if you ask me. But even more importantly, this gargantuan creature actually knew Joy Boy too. And not only that, this elephant, it turns out, is also one of One Piece's most infamous criminals, which says something in a story that's all about piracy and stuff, because Zunesha's been punished to walk the seas for eternity. No breaks, no vacation days, not even paid family leave, man. But the real mystery here is, why? I mean, we do know that they committed some sort of crime, but against who? Against Joy Boy? Against Emu? Who commanded this poor fella to walk the ocean forever and ever, and why are they unable to disobey this command as well? I mean, surely it must be Emu, right? It kind of like seems like it would be pointing towards Emu. I can't imagine it's anyone but Emu, but I've been wrong before and I will be wrong again, and maybe Zunesha just betrayed Joy Boy and Joy Boy punished them. All we know is that Zunesha has been waiting hundreds of years at this point for please someone to command it and, give him something else to do. They were absolutely desperate for Momo to give him an order so that it could actually break out of their whole walk around for all eternity command during the Zou arc. And even when Jack was literally firing cannonballs at it, it couldn't do anything to fight back without an actual command. So whoever commanded it originally must have been really freaking powerful. And to me, it kind of seems that Zunesha can break out of its punishment without being given a new order by someone with a very specific power. Now, Luffy of course could hear Zunesha with the voice of all things, which by itself is already a crazy and kind of hard to understand power, but only Momo specifically could actually give it a new command. Now, as we saw during the end of the Wano arc, Zunesha also seems to be the key to actually opening the borders of Wano, which is why they originally came to Wano until Momo decided against opening the borders right away and was kind of like, we'll do that later when the right time is happening. And my guess is that they'll most likely just use that giant trunk of theirs to smash down the walls built up around the island of the samurai. It is kind of odd though, because we do know that would also unleash the ancient weapon Pluton, because the whole Momo commanding it kind of thing really reminded me also of course of Shirahoshi commanding the Sea King. So until we found out that Pluton is actually hidden beneath Wano, I thought that Zunesha might even be Pluton for a while. I think that's pretty solidly debunked at this point. I do wonder still though if there might be some connection here. There's like a very old theory I even talked about on the channel like ages ago, that kind of all of the ancient weapons come in, 3 parts. One person to lead, some big creature that pulls some giant vehicle, like Shirahoshi commands the Sea Kings who pull the Noah, or Momo commanding Zunesha to pull whatever is under Wano. Could still be interesting, but at this point, who knows? And we also can't forget that during the Wano arc specifically, Zunesha recognized Luffy. Well, I guess technically he said Joy Boy has returned, which tells us not only that Zunesha remembers Joy Boy, but it can actually also sense that same energy or drumbeat or will within Luffy when he awakens his devil fruit. That of course means that Zunesha is connected to the drums of liberation as well, just like Emeth, which is why I'm pretty sure at this point that just like Emeth, Zunesha was also an old buddy of Joy Boy, possibly again a fellow crewmate. I personally don't think that JB was the type to discriminate and not allow a big giant elephant into his club, neither would Luffy, but eventually we'll finally have to find out the whole truth behind Zunesha and that mysterious crime that they did commit. And of course, once the final war kicks off, Zunesha is gonna play a huge role because, he big. But speaking of ancient allies of Joy Boy, let's now talk about a character we just can't get around at any rate, and they're gonna be more and more important as well, which is Nefertari D. Lili. Because if there is one person who really turned the tide of the entire Void Century, it's gonna be my girl right here. Now Lili, for all we know, was queen of the Alabasta country during the Void Century, during the exact time that Joy Boy, Emu, and the Great Kingdom were at war. In what constellation, we still don't know, but Lili was ruling Alabasta. She was one of the 20 rulers who originally came together with Emu presumably to form the world government, but here's the thing. When all the other 19 kings packed up and moved up to Marijua to become celestial dragons and ride on their slaves and hoard all the money, Lili instead said, nah, I'm good, and stayed behind on the surface in her kingdom. Well, or at least that's what she was supposed to do, but she never actually made it back to the island. She just, poof, vanished. Records say that she disappeared, leaving no heir and no explanation, and one of the original founders of the world government was secretly also carrying the will of D, because yes, Lili and also Vivi are members of the D clan, the so-called enemies of the gods that kind of are opposing the celestial dragons to begin with. And Emu probably, I think we can guess, didn't like that too much. So Lili was either killed, imprisoned, or went into hiding. I think that's what happened, but it's kind of unclear whether she was born with that initial, the D initial, or if this was just the era where the D clan as a concept and the will of D even came into existence to begin with. I mean, I've thought for quite a while now that the entire original D clan may have just adopted the initial after allying with Joy Boy, that the will of D is somehow tied to Joy Boy, maybe Joy Boy laughing in Nika form. But at the same time, now with everything we've gotten about the mural and like the first world of One Piece, maybe the Will of D dates back even further into the past than just the Void Century. Anyways, I really think what's most likely here is that Lili was at first all in for the Alliance because presumably the Ancient Kingdom did something very messed up that needed to be fought against, but then she saw Imu's real intentions and then switched to the side of Joy Boy instead. Whether Joy Boy was then part or ruler of the Ancient Kingdom, we don't really know. However, at that point, that might have been a little bit too late already, because the battle of the Void Century at this point has already been lost, but there was still one thing that she could do to hold out hope that someone in the future might be eventually taking down Imu's world government instead. So she decided to preserve the true history and help Joy Boy by spreading the poneglyphs throughout the world. So maybe she never returned to Alabasta because she was on a One Piece world tour dropping things off left and right, though I do kind of really love the idea that she was maybe a potential past pawpaw fruit user and just sent those things flying different islands that way. Either way, thanks to her, the true history still lives on to this day. Imu very clearly has some kind of weird obsession or crush with her, like they spend all of their free time staring at a giant portrait that they have of her. They personally target Vivi, who is Lili's descendant obviously, and they even talk about Lili like she betrayed them, or actually they talk more about that Lili made a mistake, so they're weirdly forgiving with her. So that kind of raises the question, were Imu and Lili once friends? Or maybe more than friends? Very good friends. I mean, the Imu, Joy Boy, Lili throuple allegations, they just keep deepening, bro. Clearly, something happened between these people that led Imu to both curse her decisions, while also still seemingly forgiving her and idealizing her in some weird, very weird way. And some people have even gone on to theorize that Lili might have gone on to found Amazon. Lili, I mean, it's right in the name. The love sickness could even be passed down from then, when she was down bad for Joy Boy. And there's also just a ton of other really interesting stuff here that seems to connect the island to the person. For one, Amazon Lili, all the people there are named after flowers, right? Like every single of the Kuja tribe are named after flowers, and Lili named after a flower and the flower that gives the country its name. Also, the Kuja all have snakes, and what do we know? In Alabasta, the king, the male side of the royal family, is named after a snake, Cobra, so it might be very possible that, Lili took that entire culture, brought it over to the island that now only allowed women on it, and was like, well, I still need my partner's snake, so that's where the entire snake thing comes from. Also, it's very weird that the, Amazon Lili in general and the Kuja tribe are located within the Calm Belt, which until very recently, may I remind you, was not reachable for anyone, including the world government, because Vegapunk was the one who discovered that you can code ships with the Sea Prism Stones, and that way, now the Navy can actually cross the Calm Belt into wherever they kind of want to go. But before that, that island was pretty much untouchable and would have made a pretty great hideout for Lili to hide from Imu and just kind of do whatever they needed to do, especially also now that for whatever reason, Oda thought it was very important to throw the Kuja tribe and Amazon Lili back into the limelight and make it one of the most important parts of the story through God Valley and the entire Rocks flashback, because again, God Valley would not have happened without Shaki, because everyone was in love with this woman. So I'm still standing by the idea that God Valley was supposed to show us on a smaller scale what the entire Void Century conflict might have been about too. A woman, in other words, Lili, who then went into exile and kind of banned all men from that island because she didn't want to cause another Great War. That's of course also the concept of Romance Dawn, which is the name of the first chapter of the story and what One Piece was originally supposed to be called. So I think there's a really good chance that that's what happened, that Lili was one of the main reasons the war even happened to begin with, and then she went into exile after she spread the poneglyphs on Amazon Lili, founding that country, kind of creating that love sickness weird thing that the empresses there have going on, and then turning Shaki, then Tritoma, and then Boa Hancock now with Luffy into very important figures for the fate of the entire world. Now, apologies for that little ramble. Instead, let's now hop out of the Void Century for a moment. We spent enough time there, I think, and fast forward to 400 years ago, because I now want to talk about Kalgar and the Shandians. So, Kalgar here was an absolute legend of the Shandia tribe. He was a warrior who lived on the island of Jaya back when it was still connected to the Blue Sea, was part of the regular ocean. His people were descendants of the ones who protected the Golden City Shandora, and I think we can pretty safely assume they were also part of Joy Boy's Great Alliance since they were tasked with guarding one of his poneglyphs. So even centuries after Joy Boy's death, Kalgar's tribe was still carrying out the Great Kingdom's mission, protecting the true history of the world against its enemies. That, in my book at least, certifies him as a real legend and someone we should talk about in this video. But before we dive into Kalgar's partner in crime here, let's talk about one of Kalgar's friends who's still alive to this day. I'm talking about Nola here. Yes, the giant snake of Upper Yard, you might remember it, and the grandchild of another giant snake named Kashigami, a god, who gets straight up beheaded by Noland in a very cold panel. And believe it or not, Nola, yes, has been around for over 400 years too now. She was just a baby during Kalgar's and Noland's time, and the grandchild of one of the many gods that the Shandians worshipped, but by the time that Luffy went exploring inside her body, she'd grown into one of the biggest living relics of that entire age. And speaking of Shandora's golden legacy, we also have to talk about the man who made that legend happen, one of my favorite and most underrated characters in One Piece, Mont, Blanc, Noland, the real goat here. 400 years ago, this guy just showed up on Shandora, and Kalgar pretty much immediately tried to kill him, so in classic shonen fashion, the beginning of a beautiful friendship. Noland was an expert botanist, you know that? Pretty cool. Saving the Shandians that way from the tree fever, but unknowingly obviously stamping on their traditions by cutting down the ancestral trees, which I think might be related to this story of devil fruits and stuff, but that's a different story. The misunderstanding here drove obviously a big wedge in between the two besties, but as Noland leaves, Kalgar finally realizes that he actually saved them and makes Noland promise to return one day. But then, as you know, the Shandians actually get knocked up, and it could never happen. Honestly, for two characters who are so far removed from the current story, absolute peak One Piece backstory and history. Dude, Skypiea Skipper's got me shaking my head to this very day. Don't skip that arc. If you haven't watched it, please watch Skypiea, most important arc in One Piece. Anyways, Noland was born in the Lemniel Kingdom. He was an explorer, a scientist, and I'm gonna call it now, possibly ancestor of Usopp. Please, that'd be so cool. I mean, Noland was also worshipped as a hero by the dwarfs on Greenbit, who now basically consider Usopp a god, right? But of course, history also did Noland dirty, labeling him as a liar too. Because after the City of Gold got blasted into the sky, his own kingdom called him Noland the Liar, turning his discoveries into basically just bedtime stories. But I've also quickly got to bring up someone else who carried on Noland's legacy, so let's talk about the man, the very mysterious man, who suddenly was the big talk of the community at the start of the Elbaf arc, Louis Arnot. Who, you might ask? Well, if you've forgotten who this person is, he's the man credited with writing parts of a very mysterious book called Bragman, which is a collection of stories and tales the likes of which people now can't distinguish between myth and reality. It's kind of seen as a guidebook for dreamers, but its stories actually are based very much in reality and actually are giving hints to what's happening and going on certain islands in the Grand Line. So to a casual reader somewhere, I don't know, in the East Blue, the stories inside seem unbelievable, but we've only seen true things in it so far, it seems. Like, the doubters just don't understand how crazy the One Piece world can truly get. It gets very crazy in the Grand Line, especially in the New World, and we actually first hear about the Bragman book way back during Little Garden, then see it again amongst the book Rescued from Ohara, and then again much later in Elbaf, when Oda pulls an Arnot quote warning adventurers not to linger at the islands and amongst the giants for too long, which has not paid off as the making of this video, but maybe we'll find out why you're not supposed to be on Elbaf for too long one day. More importantly though, who was this guy? I mean, Oda never tells us outright. I hate that, I want to know, but at least we do know that he was probably an explorer who braved the Grand Line sometime between 100 years and roughly 30 years ago in the story. And we can actually calculate this roughly because he found and mentioned Dory and Broggy in Little Garden, and they only arrived there about 100 years ago. But then we also saw that book on Ohara before it was Buster called, which means it was published at least 30 years ago, giving us a very rough estimate here. I think it's more older than, like more like 80, 90, 100 years ago, but it could theoretically be 40, 50 years ago. And again, depending on how old he actually was, he could have been sailing well before he ever met the giants in Little Garden 2, so he might be even 120, 130 years ago, right? Either way, a very mysterious but clearly important person, and I'm kind of starting to get a feeling that Oda just dropping random Bragman quotes from him just to mess with my theory brain specifically is a thing that's going on, but I'm probably thinking too much about that. Still, love these little details. Was he just like a random dude who liked to explore and Oda just throws him in for some, like decoration? Or are the Bragmen actually much more important, inheriting an important will from the past and, having like some actual role in the story? I like to know, but we're probably gonna have to wait. So instead, it's now time for a true legend, the former king of the world, at least according to Davy D, the original guy who founded that family, Davy D. Jones. Okay, back to some peak stuff. During the God Valley flashback, we finally found out that this guy actually exists in the history of One Piece, and not only exists, but also is like a totally important and central character to the plot, it seems. But kinda like Joy Boy, he is an absolute enigma. We don't know exactly where he was born or even when he lived. He could have been walking around during the Void Century alongside Joy Boy and Lili, or he might be way older and part of the godlike figures we hear about from the first One Piece world, or somewhere in between. We have literally no idea. But his influence is absolutely massive. I mean, just take a look at his descendant Rox D, or should I say Davy D, who says that he worships Jones kind of like a god. It really seems like the entire Davy clan aren't just worshippers of Davy Jones, they're also his actual flesh and blood descendants, it seems. And I'm just gonna say that if we have the greatest pirate of a whole generation over here following in Davy Jones's footsteps, then he wasn't just some small-time person or small-time king, no. He was one of the central figures of his entire era, whenever that was, and something absolutely crazy must have happened to him to make him so loved by some and yet absolutely hated to the same level as Joy Boy by someone like Emu. But what I can't stop thinking about with this guy is this line right here, where Zebek claims that Jones was the previous king of the world. And this sentence really gets Emu like big mad. Emu immediately responds that Jones was never the king of anything, right? Like a little bit bitchy. So what really happened here? Did Zebek get some bad info, or is Emu just in straight up denial about the true king or who Davy Jones really was? Either way, it's pretty clear that there is some major history between Jones and Emu as well, and I can't wait to find out what it is. And why is Jones's middle initial D? Was he a Joy Boy ally? Does it go back even before Joy Boy? Is his name just Davy Jones? Like, I kind of need to know. I mean, pretty much everything that Rox D knows about Jones has been kept secret, but there is one thing about Jones that pretty much every pirate around the world, of course, knows, and that's the Davy back fight. Yes, we finally have it back. It's finally paid off after Long Ring Longland, which I gotta say again, my least favorite arc in One Piece, but I'm happy it's paying some dividends either way now. Now on the surface, it's just a silly pirate game, of course, but Robin already way back in the story confirmed that this game is named after an actual Davy Jones. It apparently originated on Pirate Island, which we now know is Hachinosu, and Zebek took that game to its absolute peak by winning powerhouses over like Big Mom, Kaido, and Whitebeard for his own crew. Just saying that Foxy could like never. But what if the origin of this pirate game has something to do with actually what happened to Davy himself? Could it be that Emu has captured or sealed Davy away and the Davy backfight was Jones's friends and allies trying to win him back? I mean, just speculating, but that would be an absolute insane reveal for a game that was introduced during Foxy's arc. Like, no joke, if this turns out to be true, the Long Ring Longland arc would get the Skypiea treatment and everyone and their mom would be rereading the arc for some hidden clues. Probably should do that either way. I'm gonna put that on my list here for a second. All right, Long Ring Longland reread incoming. Anyways, Davy Jones is probably long dead at this point. But just like Joy Boy's will has been passed on through pirates like Roger and Luffy, it very much seems like Jones's will of revenge and taking down Emu has kept on living on through the Davy clan with people like Zebek and now Teach. Or, even funnier, will Oda maybe pull a big twist on us and reveal that Davy Jones is still alive? Like, is he imprisoned inside Davy Jones's locker or within the darkness of the abyss? Could he be, dare I say, the man marked by flames? I made a video that he might be locked in behind the big whirlpool that we know nothing about, behind the giant gates of justice. A video here, link below. All the links below for all these videos. But you can become the king of the world just like Davy Jones by joining my Ohara Patreon. You'll get instant access to artwork, early chapter reactions I do, a weekly newsletter that's for free actually, and a ton of more stuff like behind the scene and bonus videos. So if you're interested to support and also get something in return, join the crew using the Patreon link in the description below. Everything's in the description below today. Wow, crazy. Now, for the ancient weapon herself, Poseidon. We often talk about the ancient weapons like they're these giant machines, but Poseidon, we know, wasn't a machine. She was instead a beautiful mermaid princess. And what made her the deadliest sea dweller of the Void Century was her unique ability to command the Sea Kings. As we see in the mural, she was a central player in the biggest conflict of that era, which ended with Joy Boy failing to keep his promise to that mermaid princess. And the part that kind of keeps messing with me is that Poseidon's abilities weren't a one-time thing at all. Instead, her powers seemed to literally cycle through generations of the royal family until it landed on the current mermaid princess, Shirahoshi. Now, was the Poseidon from the Void Century the actual first one with these powers? We don't know. If so, how did she get the powers to repeat generations later? It must be some DNA, well, in One Piece it would be lineage factor shenanigans going on, or instead have these powers maybe been around even since the first One Piece world. I personally think that that's more likely since the kanji used in the ancient weapons Kodai Heiki hints that they are truly ancient, the kanji for ancient, much older than that kingdom from the Void Century where Oda uses the kanji for great, which is why I usually say great now instead of ancient kingdom, even though ancient kingdom technically more commonly used amongst fans. Now, is this a magical sort of power that Poseidon has, or is it a form of lost technology, very much like Vegapunk has suggested that devil fruits are? I kind of think so, because there seems to be something with the DNA and lineage factor, as I said, going on here too, but I've also got to talk about the creatures, of course, that Poseidon could command, the Sea Kings themselves. And what really blows my mind every single time is how casually the story's actually treating them, like, in a really weird way. I hope you agree. Like, they seem straight up to be monsters, island-sized, but these things are so much more. They're intelligent, very intelligent. The Sea Kings are talking, strategizing, and dreaming, and, planning for the future. And here's the real kicker. They were all present during the Void Century. They literally remember Joy Boy's promise. They know what the Noah is supposed to do. They know the prophecy about the two sovereigns or two kings and what role Shirahoshi is meant to play as the reborn version of Poseidon as well. Which, by the way, I'm placing my bets right now. Let's gamble a little bit that the two sovereigns are Loki and Shirahoshi, the best pink-haired future POW couple of the story. I mean, let's be real, they share so many things in common. They were both born with some crazy, scary power that made them unique, both from the royal bloodline of a very ancient kingdom connected to Joy Boy and the Great Kingdom, right? Like Fishman Island and Elbaf, the only place still pretty much untouched since the Void Century by the government, etc. And Loki has the crazy eyes, Shirahoshi has the crazy powers. There is a lot of stuff going on with, the Galleila, these like ancient shipbuilder tribes that are coming from Elbaf that probably built Pluton, right? And Loki having a hammer now that, hasn't recognized anyone for many hundreds of years, but now it's recognized, Loki. So I think there's a pretty good chance that Loki is connected to one of the ancient weapons as well. Whether that is true or not, the Sea King's abilities specifically are actually pretty wild. The way that they communicate across some insane distances, they recognize Poseidon instantly, they can be heard also by people like Luffy, Roger, and Odin using the very mysterious voice of all things, which, again, every time I mention it, just seems like this beyond broken cheap power. But honestly, every time any of the Sea Kings show up, I kind of feel like Oda is reminding us that the ocean is not just some empty space in One Piece, it's very much a living ecosystem built with ancient powers, and I guess now we also know that thanks to the rising sea levels, the entire ancient world, or most of it at least, is slumbering beneath the waves anyways. By the way, I particularly love this shot from Vegapunk's message that one of my artists has colored, where we see this one, giant Sea King cruising around or between these ancient ruins of the ancient One Piece world. Not only beautiful, but how much does this say about the truth of the One Piece world as a whole? Like, easily one of the favorite panels of mine from the last couple of years. But yeah, where was I? All right, yeah, the Sea Kings. Well, the day that Shirahoshi is gonna call them into action, the entire One Piece planet is gonna move, and that's when we finally will see Joy Boy's failed promise swing back into motion, and I just assume Luffy's gonna want to pick up the mantle and actually, fulfill that promise in his stead. But while they shake up the sea, let's now get back to land instead on our list, specifically to Oars, the continent puller. Now, Oars was an ancient giant, much bigger than other part-blooded ancient giants like Harold and Loki, but of course the real question is his nickname literal? Was he actually pulling continents around? Maybe it wasn't actually himself, but an even bigger ancestor of his that pulled different islands together to form the new Wano. After all, if the Onigashima skull did belong to a real creature once, that thing would actually make the Oars that we met on Thriller Bark look absolutely tiny. And that's of course far from the only Wano connection that Oars has either, because we do know that Oars died somewhere called the Land of Ice, which I'm betting is the winter island Ringo in Wano, by the way. A place so cold that Kawamatsu called it the Eternal Grave because bodies straight up don't decompose there. Hundreds of years later then, Moria dug up Oars to create the ultimate zombie, and we do know now that Moria, well, who would have had that on the bingo card, is actually, yes, a member of the Kozuki clan and fought Kaido on Wano and has a grave in Ringo. Heck, this arc is where we first heard Wano referenced Thriller Bark, because that's also where he dug up Ryuma and Shusui, who then turned out to be Zoro's ancestors. Oda really, Oda's dropping stuff in SBSs and in cover stories. Why not let us know these fantastic pieces of lore in the story? But I mean, better than not having them at all, I guess. But now the ongoing Elbaf arc has me asking so many questions about what ancient giants even are. Are they from Elbaf originally? Do those giant horns and fangs have some connection to Imu's demons? And were Oars and his comrades secretly part of the OG Galleila shipwrights, for example, which kinda would make sense? And the Galleila shipwrights specifically weren't just craftsmen, they were these legendary builders amongst giants that existed long before the oldest giants today were even ever born, which is at least 500 years in the past, but let's be real, probably dates back to the Void Century and even before that. We also know that our boy Davy D wanted to really find them for his plan. Something apparently happened to these members of the Galleila, but from the clues that we got in chapter 1154 and the silhouettes of the Galleila members, it really seems like the world government managed to capture them at some point, freeze them in ice, and store them right here on Punk Hazard, where then Chopper can look at them through the ice. Scary. Now, were they frozen there so that it could be studied and kept in place, or did they find them frozen, maybe in Wano and Ringo, and brought them to Punk Hazard later? Could it even have been Kaido who sent them to Caesar specifically to kind of do some research for the numbers that Caesar was trying to work on for him too? And does the government plan to thaw them at some point and have them build a new Pluton? After all, if they were frozen in Ringo, well, that is part of Wano where the original Pluton is slumbering under the island, right? I mean, the Galleila are the most likely candidates for me for building both the Pluton and the Noah, two of the single most important ships ever introduced in the story. And let's also not ignore the fact that, of course, the original Galleila definitely has a connection to Water 7's current premier shipbuilding company, the Galleila 2. Also, just for full disclosure, I think I can leave this in the video. I just randomly recording this had an idea for another video. I'm just gonna write it down, but in case you see that video on my timeline, you now heard it here first. Could it be that the Noah was just straight up Joy Boy's ship, and that the ancient weapons together kind of were part of Joy Boy's original pirate ship, and that it was like the Noah was like a whole country, like a ship, a floating country, a pirate country? I'm gonna write this down. I'm gonna look into it. Maybe it's something, maybe it's nothing. But if I make that video, you heard it here first. What did I call it? Is the Noah Joy Boy's pirate ship / a floating kingdom? Question mark. Now, speaking of legends whose stories echo long after their own time, let's now instead shift to someone who isn't defined by size or brute force, but by sheer, undeniable skill, once again tied to Wano, because Shimotsuki Ryuma was a samurai so iconic, he quite literally slayed a dragon and didn't even need any magic or an ancient weapon to do that. Just pure skill, pure technique, and pure aura, and I guess pure Zoro ancestor energy that doesn't hurt as well. And the fact that Oda's one-shot Wanted tells us Ryuma's story just kind of makes the whole thing even more cemented as canon. But the world that Ryuma lived in was absolutely wild too. I mean, Wano was known as the land of gold, and pirates were constantly trying to invade it, so Ryuma wasn't just protecting a country, he was defending what might have been one of the most valuable locations on the entire One Piece planet. Because as we learned during the Wano arc, next to gold, there's also this very unique material that can be worked into sea prism stone and all the sea prism other shenanigans that are going on, right? And special weapons. So no wonder that his sword, Shusui, literally became a national treasure. It's one of only 2 known black blades, and honestly, if any guy was going to make his sword evolve through sheer willpower, it's gonna be Ryuma right here. I mean, even hundreds of years later after his death, when Moria turned his corpse into a zombie, Ryuma was still a certified beast. And I kinda bet that his will lived on in his blade, because zombie Ryuma was only defeated by his own descendant, Zoro, who then reclaimed Shusui and at some point brought that treasure back to Wano, leaving it there in the place where it was supposed to lay at rest anyways. And honestly, while we're on the Wano train right now, let me just hit you with a blast from the past, moving back into the Void Century and the present, because someone from the Void Century who showed up in the current storyline is Kozuki Toki. And let's not kid around here, she's basically a walking and talking spoiler from the past, having lived in the Void Century, which is kind of why Oda had to remove her from the story at all cost, I think. Toki was born more than 830 years ago, which means that she was there during everything that happened, right when everything collapsed. And I bet that she knew Joy Boy. But instead of getting wiped out with Joy Boy and his allies, she used her Time Devil Fruit to jump forward throughout history. I think another failsafe in addition to the poneglyphs. I would bet that she had some secret mission from Joy Boy to wait in the right moment for the next person to come and kind of make sure that, you know, Joy Boy's successor would be successful. Is that why they call it a successor? Who knows? A question for a different person. Then after she arrived in the current storyline, she met Kozuki Oden, and they had Hiyori and Momo, who we know has to be super important with the commanding Zunesha and opening Wano's borders thing and being the current shogun of Wano. We already talked about this, right? The Kozuki clan stays one of the most important families in the story, especially since they're the ones who crafted the poneglyphs for Joy Boy to begin with. Toki to me proves that the people of the Void Century weren't absolutely hopeless, because she carried the dawn of the world with her, and the way that she talks about it kind of makes it feel like she knew way more than she ever got the chance to talk about. And cards on the table here, I really don't think we've seen the last of Toki yet. I mean, I haven't seen a body. That's always a red flag in One Piece. And why would she use her powers to send Momos and the other forward in time and not just also time travel herself again? For all that I know, she's just chilling on Laugh Tale right now, waiting for Luffy and the gang to finally show up so she can launch into that big Void Century flashback that we all really need. Oda, I need the Void Century flashback, please. Alright, but let's now also touch on the people that Toki was probably running from, partly at least. The Gorosei. You know, the 5 elder planets, those dudes who have been 55 years old for about 800 years at this point. We literally see Saturn pulling up to investigate Emeth 200 years ago, and he just looks exactly the same. They come from those original noble 20 bloodlines of the 20 kingdoms that defeated, Joy Boy and the Ancient Kingdom and created the world government. Along with the Holy Knights, they're basically there to guard the lie that then became the modern One Piece world. In terms of power, they sit just right underneath Imu on the power ladder and make the big calls that guide the entire fate of the world. Each of them has a very specific area that they oversee in the government, like Mercury is in charge of justice and Jupiter is the head of agriculture. Well, let's be real, these guys are just straight up demons, and they're not really good at their job either. Each of them has a beast form or a yokai form, and even Luffy in his Nika form hasn't been able to land a good blow on any of them yet. But they do get their mortality from Imu, we know that now, when they pledge their lives to the Great One and get one of those, Abyss Circle tattoos from Imu directly. At least until you let them down and they decide to suck the life out of you. So long, Saturn, for a second time this video. But Saturn's death really shook up our entire understanding of the Gorosei to begin with, because once he got the axe and Garling was then promoted up to the 5 elders, it has somewhat opened up the possibility that Imu has already replaced more of the Gorosei throughout the centuries whenever any of the original ones actually disappoint them. So it is very much possible that the original 5 might have been around since the Void Century, but they might have also been replaced slowly one by one every couple of centuries, with new elders being chosen from the descendants of the original 20 ruling families. And I don't know, on the one hand, I kind of want all 5 of them originally to have lived during the Void Century, but it also would be very random and weird if only one of them got replaced right now in the story, so you pick which one you prefer. Instead, let me now preach upon you the gospel of the Great Liberator, because Pastor Manu is here to spread the good word of our great sun god and savior, Nika. Now, the only problem and thing here is we just don't know much at all. Like, as much as I love to theorize about them, I still don't know exactly when Nika, actually was supposed to have lived. In fact, we don't even know if Nika was even real to begin with. My best guess is that they probably lived during the first world, since the sun god is mentioned in the Harley text. However, what we don't know is if Nika was a literal sun god. Was Nika a straight up divine being, or just a Lunarian with some crazy technology, or another alien who people then started worshipping later on, or maybe just a normal, very strong human who liberated a lot of people and then got mythologized throughout the ages? At this point, it's just impossible to know for sure until Oda decides to divulge some new information about that, but in Elbaf lore at least, there seem to be 2 opposing versions of Nika. One, very similar to Luffy, tied to freedom, joy, and liberation, and another one tied to chaos and destruction. It does line up pretty perfectly with the Harley text and the destruction and recreation of the worlds throughout the eras. Are there 2 Nikas, or are they 2 different facets or interpretations of the very same person or being? Are we watching the return of the good Nika through Luffy, and the other half of it will be taken up by another character? I mean, Loki does literally tell us that he's also the sun god who will destroy the world. Might be the second half, but for all the emphasis on freedom, Luffy, we gotta be honest, is pretty destructive too. I would argue, smashing up pretty much everything in his path on the way to Laugh Tale, and he is prophesized to at some point destroy Fishman Island too. Not that I don't enjoy Luffy's more violent tendencies, but not exactly the most peaceful way of doing things is all I'm saying. But hold up though, let me take you back to the very first chapter after Luffy awakened his devil fruit, because Luffy, look at him, was a complete maniac. He couldn't control his laughter, he was straight up possessed, not feeling like regular Luffy at all. That could actually be true, because it's possible that the will, or soul you could say, of Nika still very much lives on inside the devil fruit, and we also do know that zone fruits do have a will of their own, so it's very possible, even likely I would argue, that Nika's soul is hanging out in Luffy's body. We also can't forget that Nika is absolutely tied to the One Piece treasure, because Roger hinted that he couldn't use whatever he found on Laugh Tale because they didn't have something yet. He was too early, and that something, in my opinion, probably just has to be right, the awakened Nika fruit, and more specifically, I would guess the drums of liberation heartbeat, because as I discussed with Emeth already, this drum beat seems like an ancient power source almost that might be the key to using whatever is laying hidden on Laugh Tale, and if you go there without the Nika fruit and without having awakened it, you might just not be able to use anything that's on there. I suspect that might be the whole reason that Shanks was supposed to find the fruit in the first place. Then there's also the really fun idea that Nika and Emu are actually two immortal enemies who have been around ever since the start of the world itself. There's that figure in the Elbaf mural that looks like Emu again, so it's definitely possible that Emu is super ancient, way more ancient, and has destroyed the world a couple of times, but I can't deny that Emu seems more connected to people like Joy Boy, Davy, and Lili, so it could be a case of a reincarnation, inherited will, where Joy Boy and Luffy are more the incarnations of, you know, Nika, while Nerona Emu took on the mantle of some older, more ancient eldritch horror being. An earth god, or the sea devil perhaps, or even the hellflame serpent. Speaking of which, that brings me to the other gods, because we can't let the sun god have all the fun alone, because there are at the very least 4 gods in the One Piece world. I kind of think there might have been even more, but that's for a different video. We first heard about these 4 gods way back in chapter 287. Thank you, Skypiea, for that. Again, the gift that keeps on giving. And then the idea of the 4 gods was really hammered home during the Elbaf Harley text, because according to One Piece legend, there were 4 divine forces holding everything together. Those were the sun god, even though the sun god for some reason is the only one written in, you know, like quotation marks, so that's a bit sus, but hey. Sun god, then the forest god, the sea god, sometimes called the rain god like in Shandora, and the earth gods. Obviously, the only one we know a lot about at this point is the sun god Nika, and by a lot, I mean barely anything. The other 3 are straight up fully up for interpretation at this point, but I do think it stands to reason that if the sun god has a modern incarnation in the form of Luffy, the other 3 should, in my opinion, at least deserve other devil fruits associated with them too. The forest god is obviously one of the easier ones to connect. The Adam and Eve tree seem very important to the world's lore, and the Harley text even says that the forest god sent forth its devils and demons. I think there's 100% connection between the forest god and the origin of devil fruits. And of course, we've seen Emu create literal devils with Domi Reversi, and they hang out in the flower room all the time, so maybe they're actually the forest god. I don't know. And then there's the sea god, who's a little bit harder to pin down. The sea god could be Davy Jones because of the whole Davy Jones's locker interpretation. And if the forest god is the source of devil fruits, like, I don't know, it's pretty likely that the sea god has a rivalry with the forest god, since the sea god rejects devil fruit powers and hates them. Of course, ever since Emu's name was revealed, it's been pointed out that Emu is the reverse version of Umi, and Umi is the Japanese word for ocean. I've probably said that like a million times in videos, but I still think it's relevant and should still bring it up. And considering that Emu loves flooding the entire world, they could definitely have that power as well. But alright, hold up. If Emu is Umi backwards, wouldn't it make more sense that Emu is the opposite of the sea god, right? Making them the Earth God? I mean, they do rule over the planet Earth, and the Harley text describes the alliance between the Earth God and the Hellflame Serpent, and we do see the little figure that looks a whole lot like Emu hanging out on the side of the massive snake in the mural, and they do live on top of the red line, which is as far away from the ocean as you can be. I mean, low-key, I think that this Hellflame Serpent might have died and become the red line as well, which is, again, where Emu lives. Not very ocean-like, more Earth-like. Oh wait, is Emu just all of the gods? Or hold on, while I go on full theory mode here, could the 3 gods that are Nika be trapped in the abyss where Emu is just channeling their different powers from? I don't know, man. Again, we don't even know for sure that these characters actually existed in the story, but I sure pray that they did, because this is the stuff that I live for. But I guess theoretically they could just be ancient figures who were then mythologized over time, Lunarians maybe, who came to the blue planet and were worshipped as gods because of their crazy supreme technology. I mean, it really seems like there's so much here. I could just make a whole video just theorizing about the 4 gods on the One Piece world. Wait a minute. I did that already right here, and you can check it out, my full thoughts on it, by clicking on that video right here. Otherwise, thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much to our fantastic Patreon members, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.